Hi, welcome back to Scale to Exit with Alejandra Santos. I'm so glad you're here today. We have prepared a great episode for all of you business owners that have commercial real estate or are leasing a building and you're planning to sell your business. But before we dive in, I want to say thank you for everybody for stopping by. If you're new into the podcast, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you are a seasoned Scale to Exeter, then we welcome you back. Thank you so much for stopping by, and thank you for supporting us as we continue to deliver great information to all of my amazing guests that are preparing to scale for an exit. And if you're already on the exit side, then this is definitely an episode for you. I want to say, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share the episodes to your friends and colleagues or whoever you find that they are in the process. They have a business and they're in the process as well of even scaling or exiting. And before we dive in, I also want to say, guys, that we have created a proprietary tool here in-house at Into the Next, where basically gives you the opportunity to see where your business stands valuation-wise. And it also gives you the opportunity to see, even if you're not trying to sell or exit, if you're ready to scale in the most painless, in the most efficient way that is to scale a business. Because like I said in many of my episodes, revenue can come, but if you don't have the right infrastructure to sustain that growth is going to feel very chaotic and very painful. So this is why we're here at Scale to Exit, trying to give you the tools, the knowledge, the education, the insights, and everything that comes along with really scaling a business for a peaceful scale or a scale for an exit as well. Okay, so let's dive in. I'm so excited to bring this guest here. So in this episode, I'm joined by Caleb David, he's the commercial director at Keller Williams and a seasoned real estate broker. And he's coming here to explore the hidden side of business exits, which is your real estate, your commercial real estate. So from negotiating leases to positioning properties for investors, Caleb shares how business owners can maximize value when selling both their company and their commercial assets. But this conversation goes deeper than square footage and cap rates, everybody. We dive into identity shifts, what happens when you actually sell your business, what that does, the burnout, the community, and the healing when it comes to making big transitions in business and life. So there's a few things that you're going to learn. You're going to learn the 3 ways owners can structure a sale when real estate is involved, how lease assignments versus assumptions impact liability during an exit, why timing, financial records, and even a 40,000 HVAC unit can make or break a deal, the importance of the right broker and the red flags to watch out for, how slowing down, checking your ego, and aligning with your values matter as much as the numbers. He's coming in with nearly 20 years in the nonprofit sector. He founded the Table Initiative, bringing awareness and resources to global social justice issues in marginalized communities. And his work has even earned him international recognition with the Golden Rule Goodwill Ambassadorship Award. So are you ready to dive into Caleb's conversation and I, where we go really deep on what to do if you own a commercial real estate and you're trying to sell your business, or if you're leasing as well. As usual, you can find me on www.alejandrasantos.com. It's actually a new website that I just launched. Because if you guys want to get in touch with me, it's more direct. You can also get in touch with me by going on my LinkedIn. Make sure that you subscribe, and then you also write me some comments on YouTube or any other platform of your choice. And the Scale and Exit Readiness Index is available. If you just drop me at hello@thealejandrasantos.com and you tell me, Alejandra, I want to know where I stand with my business, I'll be like, there you go. And then we can go over the results together. This is completely free, very complimentary. So yeah, it's for everybody that's tuning in. If you want to know exactly if your business is ready to scale or if where it stands in valuation, this index is for you, created in-house, proprietary, just for all of my amazing business owners out there that continue to live the dream, the America dream of having a business, and now not only having it, but also selling it for such a great price. Right, guys? All right. Well, I'm going to get to the episode and I will see you on the other side. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming to Scale to Exit, Caleb. Caleb or Caleb? How do I say your name?
Caleb. Caleb.
Caleb, I love it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for coming into Scale to Exit to enlighten all of our audiences in what it takes to make a sale or an acquisition when you have real estate. I mean, you are a real estate broker that is going for an acquisition yourself as well. And you have worn many, many hats. You scaled the business, and now we're here. So, first of all, how did you become this powerhouse of a real estate broker where you also assist your clients with transactions, and what
Yeah.
drives that?
Yeah. Well, ultimately what it comes down to is the tagline for our company is creating space, building community. And so that's really what drives us. It's not just the transaction. It's not just the commission.
Mhm.
It is how do we help people accomplish their goals? And we set ourselves to a very high standard in doing that. And, real estate was something that I fell into. It's not something that I went looking for. But now I've been doing commercial real estate for about 11 years and just love being able to educate our clients because people don't know what they don't know. And so we don't just view it as, again, just a transaction and a commission check. We want 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, that client to come back and want to expand and grow. So we really try to set them up for success.
And I feel like you're also, it's very personal to you. It's not just about business, it's all about the relationship with your
Yes.
client. And that's what you bring to the table. And we talked about how you support your clients as well when they have a lease or where they have a building and they're going through an acquisition. What does that look like in a transaction?
Yeah, the thing I love about this industry is that every deal is different, every day is different. It's something new to learn and grow from and pivot and change and get creative. So, you know, um, really what I love doing is helping clients that own, whether it be a shopping center or a big industrial building, help them fill it up with the right tenants, not just anybody, but thinking about what is the tenant mix, what businesses will bring success to the other businesses within the same center or building. And so we really try to find the right tenants to do some pretty 3 to 5 year year terms so that it is more so it's more attractive to an investor, someone who's looking for that passive income. And so we take our time and really try to position the property thinking about it long term. When it comes to disposition, what does it need to look like? And then we work backwards from there. And so we've done this with on market properties, we've done it with off market properties. And we've had some good success. We'll always love to do more of that. But I think it's really thinking about the big picture, not just about what's in front of me today, but what is the end result we're trying to accomplish, and then working backwards.
Okay, so what are a few of the challenges that you have experienced with your customer, with your client, especially in such a volatile economy that we had a few years for the past few years?
Yeah. It takes a lot of listening, and like I said, I use the word pivot, and understanding how we need to adjust to the market. So one of the challenges that we're seeing right now is that people are holding back. They're not wanting to sign longer term leases, or they're not wanting to pull the trigger to purchase something. So they're looking more right now for value add properties, something that they can, with price corrections happening due to, interest rates being higher, that's been a challenge as well. I mean, we've needed the correction in the Colorado market, because it was so hot for so long. For a good 7 years, it was just like insane, so we needed to have that. But some of the challenges that we're having is finding the right tenants. We're seeing a lot of small businesses that are looking to start,
Mhm,
but with a challenge that comes with that is that from a landlord's perspective,
mhm,
financially, they're not as strong as, say, a national credit tenant, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so we're seeing people coming to market. The other challenge is everybody's looking for similar things. They're looking for, a warehouse that's less than 500 square feet with, outdoor yard. That's really difficult to find in our market. They're looking for small restaurant space. So the challenges we're seeing in that is like because of the lack of inventory, we're seeing the rental rates going up.
Mm,
And so there's multiple levels of challenges, but we have to meet it with as much creativity as possible. And sometimes a deal is not it's not the right time,
mhm.
for someone to pull the trigger on a deal. But I do want to speak to folks out there, but let's not live in fear. You still have to run your business. You still have to, you know, take care of your family. So in real commercial real estate is a part of that. And so find a broker that will help you get to the place where you need to be so that you are set up for success.
So, in terms of like businesses out there that do have a real estate property in their as an asset and they want to sell their business, how do you support those transactions? And what is something that they can do now to prepare for that transaction?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that they can do. First is, us having a conversation. What are they looking to do? Are they looking to just sell the business itself and retain the actual asset so they have rental income that's ongoing?
Mhm,
So in that case, what I would do is I would connect them with a business broker for them to evaluate the true value of their
mhm,
business. What do they
mhm,
really have to sell, right?
mhm,
Because what you're doing is you're selling the time it's been in business, you're
mhm,
selling the revenue that you
mhm,
typically have. And so it's a multiple step process. So a lot of people think that their businesses are worth more than what they really are. So
mhm,
you need that reality check of what is marketable. And then they have to make the decision, is that what they want to do? Then I've done transactions where people have sold their business, but they also want to sell the real estate that's in it as well. And so
mhm,
that's the part that I get more involved in, is really helping with the real estate transaction. So those are two pretty simple ways of a business selling. It's not simple, but it's a little bit less complicated, I guess I should say, than someone who is like, I just want to retire, but I want to sell the business. But and sometimes you just have to help people understand. You kind of ask them the right questions to find out what they're really going for. You know, um, some people just are like, I just want to shut the business down and I just want to sell the asset, right?
mhm.
And so that's definitely an option. So it's a process of people learning, okay, what do I really want to do? And that's when we step in and try to help guide them in the right direction.
Okay, so basically, for everybody that's listening out there that has a coffee shop or a restaurant or a nail salon or a hair salon, whatever it is, and you have a location, an asset under your business name, you have options. You have the option to
Yes.
either sell the business with the asset, or you have the business only, which is the portfolio of clients, the cash flow, the revenue, all the good stuff. Or you have the option to only sell the
Mhm.
building, right? And then
Yes.
continue renting it to other people. And that's when you get involved in the real estate transaction. Do you also provide like a broker's opinion of value? How does that process work?
Yeah, so that's something that we provide to clients as well as an option if they don't want to get a full-blown appraisal, which is where you get the true real value of a property.
Mhm,
One thing, just going back a little bit, is it's the importance of, if you have a business, keeping good financial records, have a
mhm.
good CPA, keep track of your taxes,
I
keep
say
track.
a CFO. I don't say a CPA because let me stop you there.
Yeah.
A CPA is for tax financials, and real financials come from the
Mm,
financial team. CPA is
yes.
taxes, and then, but yeah, continue.
Yes, no, definitely having the profit loss statements, all of
Mhm,
those things
mhm,
are really important. And so, when someone's looking to sell a building, what we a service that we provide is called that broker's opinion of value. And so what we
mhm,
do, it's a lot less expensive than getting an appraisal. And so it makes that barrier to the conversation about should they sell, should they not. And there's times that I've had clients, I mean, this year it would have been a huge sale, but they just felt like the time wasn't right after taking a look at the broker's opinion of value. And we try to be as realistic as possible as what can we sell this property for in today's market
mhm,
conditions. So
mhm,
we look at sales comps, we look at lease comps, what's
mhm,
available in the area, what's the competition.
mhm.
And so we build a report that kind of informs the potential seller of what we believe, if we were to take the property to market, that we would market it at.
And this broker's opinion of value is just for the asset, right? Definitely
Correct.
just, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Independent from financials of the business or anything like that. Okay.
Correct.
Got it. That's very interesting to know. So are there any, can you share a little bit about any situations where the client came to you and you did a transaction separate from the business transaction?
Mhm.
And how does
Yeah,
that
we
look for the future for
yeah.
the
So
acquirer of the business?
yeah, so I mean, there's many ways to slice it, but I would say we do that all the time. A lot of the work that we do is not associated with the sale of a business. I would
Mm,
say, 98%, maybe even more, is
mhm,
not associated with the sale of a business. But we know how to work with business brokers to get to a successful
okay.
transaction. So most of what we do is the actual real estate transactions. And so,
Mhm,
we've a situation that there's a building that I worked on for 8 years or so doing the marketing and leasing on. Then ended up going, and when I started my own firm,
mhm,
I no longer was doing the leasing. However, I knew that building inside and out. 28,000 square foot building. I think it had close to 10 tenants in there, a couple of vacancies. And because I knew of this property and I knew the owner of the property really well, I was able to help find and bring them a tenant and get paid a lease commission. And when I went to the owner, I said, "Hey, you've got a fully stabilized asset here right now. The market's great in industrial. You could exit this property." I think they bought the building for maybe $30 a square foot, and we're able to sell it for around 180 a square foot. Maybe a little bit more. So but then I was able to take an investor client of mine and
mhm,
match the two, right? And so I think a lot of real estate is matchmaking and saying, okay, this is compatible, this is not. And
mhm.
then, so this building, again, I went to the owner and said, it's not on the market, but I've got a buyer.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he was like, okay, I'll sell. And for years, he refused to sell. And in that particular moment, I was able to do not just the leases and bring value to the
Mhm.
property, but then take that value and bring it over to a new investor and a new owner.
Okay, so in terms of like business wise, I see a lot of transactions where people sell their business, but they're on a lease.
Yeah.
And then obviously, the people that acquire the business, you're gonna have to think about renegotiating the lease at some point or going into a new lease.
Yeah.
And maybe that they're acquiring the business because they do like the space where they're in.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
like, that the functionality of the space.
Yeah.
How can you tell someone that's buying a business that's has a lease on it, but they really like the space, and that's maybe one of the
Yeah.
reasons why they're buying it, the business itself? What is
Yeah.
something that they can do to negotiate the lease or to stay on that lease, or what is the strategy for
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, if they've got a space that already is turnkey and is working,
that? Hmm.
then they're not having to think about new location, moving, the
Hmm.
expenses that come with that, build out and tenant improvement costs that could be,
Hmm.
put on. So, if they can buy a business and stay in the space, very often, at least in the state of Colorado, leases can be there. You can sublease or you can assign the lease to someone else.
Hmm.
Typically, a landlord is going to ask for someone who's buying that business to have equal or better financials than the current tenant.
Hmm.
And, so a lot of times what they'll do, a landlord, and this is all negotiable. So work with a good broker and
Hmm.
also make sure you've got a good attorney on your side
Hmm.
that is helping you walk through all of this. So depending upon if the market has gone down, they may or may not be willing to renegotiate. You may be stuck with the terms until the end of the lease. So someone's been in there for 2 years and they've got 3 more years left on their term. Well, lots of times what landlords are going to want to do is they want to keep the original tenant on the hook with a
Hmm.
personal guarantee, along with the new owner of the business. Now, this is all based on financials. If I'm representing, a client, I try to see if my client can get out of being a personal guarantee on the lease and just
Hmm.
have that lease assigned
Hmm.
versus it being assumed. Okay, so there's
Yeah.
a big difference between the
Yes. Can you
assumption.
explain those two? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So the assumption is you're essentially just taking on the lease as it is. You and the other person are still on there. You're both on there as personal guarantors for the rent.
Hmm.
But if you can get it assigned, it's a much cleaner way to do it. So the lease gets assigned from one entity, an owner, to the next. And that is a very clean way to do it. And so I've done that multiple times for clients where, they've realized, okay, I'm leasing the space, I don't, and this doesn't have to be with the sale of the business. It can just be someone trying to get out of a sublease or out
Mhm.
of a lease. And
Mhm.
so there's many times where I've gone to market and found someone to sublease the space from a client that I put in there.
Mhm.
And, you know, what I work very hard for is to get my client off the hook,
Mhm.
find a replacement for the owner, building owner,
Mhm.
but then have my client just not have any obligations moving forward. And so, very often it can be done. It just depends upon the landlord, the listing broker,
Mhm.
and how you negotiate that. But
Mhm.
definitely some things to think about. You just because you give up your lease or somebody else buys your business doesn't mean that your liability is gone. You have to be
Mm.
sure that you are taking the right steps and you're fully aware of what the obligations are.
So that's a really important point because you can still be on the lease with someone and share responsibility and liability, or you can be 100% assigned to the new person,
Yes,
right?
correct.
I mean, so how is it? You say very much is possible. It depends on the landlord and on the broker. So assigning 100%, it must sounds like a difficult process to do.
It typically is not. Honestly, it's usually it's a one or two pager that is just an
Okay.
addendum to the lease. So you could have an addendum to the lease that actually does the assignment from one entity to the other. And I
Mhm.
just, that gets into legal stuff. So I always tell people, have a good real estate attorney on speed dial just to make
Mm.
sure they're reviewing the old lease as
Mhm.
well as the new amendment. So,
Mhm.
I just helped someone renew a lease. When they originally got in, they had bought the business from somebody else. It was a CrossFit gym,
Mhm.
and the terms were horrible. They didn't work with a broker that had their best interest. They were working directly with an owner who's not sophisticated, who doesn't understand the market, and just wants to get as much money out of people as possible. So we just renegotiated that lease to, I think, $4 a square foot less than what they were paying, which is significant.
Yeah.
But that took a process of showing the owner, here's what the competition is out there. We are looking for other options, right? And so, we were able to get the lease completely assigned, renegotiated at a much more favorable rate. And the landlord was able to keep the tenant instead of losing them. So, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but just having somebody that's on your side that has done this before, or at least is curious and is able to find the information that you need, is super important. So, what we ended up doing on this gym, they only had about a year left in their lease. So we renegotiated and say, we're going to stay for 6 years, but here's what we want in return for that.
Wow. Okay. So that's really nice story that you just shared. That these things do happen out there where you get stuck on a horrible lease with these horrible terms because you didn't work with a broker. Maybe you work with a broker that didn't have your good interest. How
Mm-hmm.
can you identify if you're working with the right broker?
Yeah, I think I think you need to work with a broker that gives you the time, right?
Okay.
That is listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
They understand what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone who is familiar with the market,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm for new brokers and letting them learn how to do this,
Mm-hmm.
so, but finding a broker that isn't just pushing paper back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are invested in your business, right? They want to see you succeed. And so I say interview people, go look at Google reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that has been huge for us, is that we've
Mm-hmm.
gained a lot of clientele just because people Google us and we've got over 55-star reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and we only have 5-star reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And so people go through and read what those person's experiences were with that broker or that company so that you can educate yourself. And, the first red flag is if you call a broker and they don't call you back. If you keep calling them, I think that's a pattern, right? And so you're going to need to expect that that's what the communication is going to be like through the process. Um, and, finding a broker that will listen, understand your goals, and I think there needs to be a personality vibe too, right? I'm not for everyone, right? So there's people that I don't work well with, and there's
Mm-hmm.
people that I work great with. I work well with most people,
Mm-hmm.
but I think for me, it's just finding that right connection
Mhm.
and making sure that you find a broker that will communicate.
Those are all really good pointers, especially the communication piece. Like if you're
Mhm.
chasing someone,
Yeah.
maybe that person is not really for you
Yes.
altogether, right?
Correct.
So in terms of like going into the market and selling, what are some documentations or things that people have to have in place prior to do that to ensure a smooth transition?
Yeah. So I think number one, having a clear business plan of what you're trying to
Hmm.
accomplish if it's a new business.
Hmm.
Um, because I think a lender is going to want to ask for that because they're going to look at your financials, shop the lending. Different banks like
Hmm.
different things. So they have appetite for different properties
Hmm.
in different business types. So, for example, I've got one client that's one lender who's also a client of mine that they don't really like to do breweries or restaurants, but there's other lenders that I know that do really well. And your
Hmm.
broker should kind of be your quarterback. They should have this group of resources of
Hmm.
different options, whether it be contractors, lenders, insurance people, to give you a few people to go out there and shop it and find what works. But
Hmm.
when it comes to financials and that sort of thing, definitely projections are important. That business plan, your personal financials, because you're going to be personally guaranteeing the lease.
You're always
Um,
personal guaranteeing the lease.
almost always,
Hmm.
almost always.
Even if you have like multi-million dollar businesses already.
Correct. And a lot of those businesses need to pay cash, right? So in that case, you don't need a lender, but and you can have a quicker close, so you might get a
Yeah,
better price. There's,
yeah.
all these different elements, but I think having your personal financials in order, your business financials in order, so that you can get the whole package to the lender so they can take a look, get pre-approved, before you really start pulling the trigger and touring properties, kind of know what your price range is.
Hmm.
And then also keep in mind some of these properties might need some work to get to what you need. So
Hmm.
then you've got to get a contractor involved and find out, okay,
Hmm.
what's that going to cost? Now, how does this affect the lending, right? And so, and using that information, the broker can renegotiate pricing at times, depending upon the seller and what position they're in. But I think having all your financials in order and knowing what your target is, be aware and talk with your broker about location, because location can be vital for certain types of businesses. Some need foot traffic, some need visibility,
Hmm.
others don't. They could care
Hmm.
less, right? They're more in the service industry, so it's more kind of
Hmm.
behind the scenes. So location isn't quite as important. So I think just being prepared and understanding what you're looking for, and if you're looking for property, that's going to need some work, try to look for properties that are lower than that price point so that
Hmm.
you have that additional wiggle room on financing to improve the building to make it to what you need it to be to operate your business out of.
Okay, those are all really good pointers. Have a business plan, make sure your personal finances are correct, your business finances. If you already have multi-million dollar businesses,
Mhm.
maybe you can put more cash down,
Yeah.
right? That will be more ideal. Okay, so when is the time if somebody already owns a business and an asset, when is the right time to start looking for if they want to sell the asset? When is the right time to start looking for a buyer? Does it take a long time to turn that around or?
Yeah, depending on the type of property, it can take some time, especially
Okay.
in a market where prices are still adjusting
Mm-hmm.
from 2022. I mean, we're 3 years from 2022, but we're still seeing price adjustments, right?
Mm,
So I think it's understanding the market, knowing what is your basis in the asset. What are you willing to walk away with? And
mm,
if you can't get to that number, then it's probably not the right time.
mm,
You want to wait for the market to start swinging a little bit better.
mm,
And I always tell people you're more likely to get more money for your asset if you sell it to an owner user versus an investor, because the
mm,
investor's
okay.
only looking at the return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
The owner occupier,
Mm-hmm.
they are looking for, does this work for my business? So
Mm-hmm.
they are willing to pay more in those
Mm.
situations.
Okay, interesting. So there's two types of buyers for a real estate asset, which is the owner operator or
Yep.
owner user
Yep.
and the investor. And the
Yes.
investor pays less. Interesting. Okay.
Yes. And the
Okay.
investor's going to want to see, they're going to want the business or the seller to either lease back for 5 years so they have a
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed income for a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
with increases in their lease year over year, which is very typical. Um, So that's one way to look at it. So if the person's like, I'm tired of managing the building, I still want to keep operating, and I've got 3 to 5 years left,
Yeah.
then what they can do is they can sell the property, take the cash, and then lease back from that owner.
From that investor then
Yes,
basically.
correct.
Okay. What other kinds of transactions besides the lease back do you usually work with?
We'll do all kinds. One that we've just listed, is just
Hmm.
north of downtown Colorado Springs, and it's definitely more positioned for an owner user. It's got a lot of
Okay.
flexibility. You've got a little bit of a retail component, some industrial, some office, all combined in one. So it's really
Mm,
unique.
nice.
So we sell, sell properties as owner user as well as investment. Right now, we don't have a ton of investment property for sale, but we do have owners that we're doing leasing for, trying to fill up their buildings
Mm.
so that when we get full and there's a decent return on it, then we can market it for sale.
So there had from like COVID times, there has been like a downward motion on sales, right, for commercial real estate.
I
Yeah.
mean, I would say since 2022.
Yeah.
COVID, we had that pause of about 3 months where
Yeah.
everything was just done, right?
Hmm.
And then we saw the market explode. The
Hmm.
commercial real
Hmm.
estate market exploded. I mean,
Yeah.
2022 was the best year I ever had, and then 2023 was one of the worst years I ever had.
Okay.
So it's definitely, there was a big response to, and there was a change of behavior in the buyers and those who were leasing, because they were adjusting to the market and how COVID has affected restaurants, how
Hmm.
COVID, so people aren't looking for 5,000 square foot restaurants to rent or purchase. They're looking for 2,000 square feet or under. They're
Hmm.
looking for, how do we minimize our square footage, maximize our profits.
Hmm.
And in the office market, you saw people working from home. So
Hmm.
the office market was probably hit the hardest, post
Hmm.
COVID, and is still struggling, but it's forcing businesses and building owners to try to get creative because we're in a different place. People are wanting to stay closer to home. They have, their values have changed. It's not just I'm going to get into the office at 7 and leave at 8, at night. It's more of a flexible, creative space. So we're seeing the businesses that are smart adjusting, maybe tweaking their office space to having more of a gathering area, like a kitchen area
Hmm.
where people can gather around,
Hmm.
and talk and interact.
Hmm.
It's not just your typical, four wall offices where people are just, jammed in there. It's like, oh, here's a hot spot. Here's this, here's that, here's telephone booths, so those people who have made those adjustments have fared well. Um, but the office market is still pretty tough.
The office market is still pretty tough. Well, I think it's going to come back because with AI technology really, making an impact in emerging
Mhm.
and changing how everybody work. I feel like people are craving more that community aspect,
Yeah.
that being, that networking aspect, the being around people aspect, more personable,
Yeah.
because AI is taking over faster than I think people would anticipate. So I think that's the reason why I think that commercial real estate will come back for the office
Yes.
space, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think it will. I think it won't look like it used to.
Mhm.
But I do think that people are, and a lot of employers are asking people to come back to the office now, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's a balancing act, and I think people are in a position to where they decide, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Some people thrive working from home, and that's fine. But I find, and I work from home a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I've just recently joined Keller Williams as their commercial director here in Colorado Springs.
Mhm.
But even just going to the office on Monday, just being around people, you feel a different energy. You can focus a little bit more. You're inspired a little bit more, right? And so I do think we're going to see more people kind of craving that. But I think people are still kind of coming out of that, post COVID, loneliness, isolation, so to speak. And I think we kind of got used to it, you know? And I think little by little, since mental health is just such a huge topic right now,
Mhm.
changing your environment to be able to have better mental health and better energy around you, I do think we will start seeing, more people going back to the office.
Some people going back to the office, yeah. So, where have you seen like okay, so you've talked about choosing your broker the right way, knowing how to choose one, and
Mhm.
you share an example of somebody that you have to work with and get them out of the lease, get better terms. What else have you seen in the industry that you can share of like those kinds of experiences that people can avoid working with brokers?
Yeah, I think, always if talk to other businesses, talk to people who have worked with other brokers and what was their experience, ask those
Hmm.
questions. Um, because I think working with the wrong broker, to me, a wrong broker is just someone who doesn't have your best interest in mind and someone who's not willing to communicate. A
Hmm.
lot of brokers in our industry only want to work big deals. They don't want to work small deals,
Hmm.
but I think find out what kind of drives and motivates the broker. If it's
Hmm.
just money, then you might want to look somewhere else, you
Hmm.
know, and I tell people, shop it around, but when you find somebody and they're working well with you, commit to them, because we work in an industry that we don't get paid by the hour and we spend a lot of time with people. I could work 6 to 8 months,
Hmm.
and, for 10 hours a week with a client and not get paid. So I think it's important for people to understand. And a lot of questions that people, and one of the reasons why people don't commit is they don't understand and they don't ask the right questions. So I very often have clients say, well, how do you get paid? Because they're thinking they're going to have to come out of pocket. So they're going to shop for the best deal, right?
Hmm.
So just like in residential real estate, if you see somebody advertising they're going to sell your property for 1%, well, you're going to get 1% effort, right? So, you've got to think about this in terms of value versus dollars, right? And having the right broker can save you sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. They can negotiate some free rent. They can coordinate, if build out is needed, when does the free rent start, so that there are more built-in protections for the business owner. But yeah, I mean, you've got to find the right person. But I think asking questions and having a broker that allows you to ask any question that comes to your mind. I tell clients all the time, you may think it's a dumb question, but that question might lead to something else that is very important
Hmm.
that will need to be addressed and discussed.
Yeah. No, I like that. So basically having somebody that gives you the space to really fully communicate, going back to that communication piece that we
Yeah.
spoke before, and somebody that really shows up for you and that doesn't like 1%. You're saying
Yeah.
1% of fee will be 1% of effort. So you're
Yeah.
getting for what you pay for, basically.
Correct. You're getting what you pay for. And there's times all the time that I will discount commissions depending on the situation
Yeah.
and how much work is involved. But I think find a broker that values themselves, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about like overestimates themselves, and has an ego and comes across with all this confidence and gusto.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just a front, right?
Hmm.
And so understand what experience that broker has, look and see what kind of transactions they have done, ask those questions. Have they worked with a business like yours before?
Hmm.
Like you mentioned a nail salon earlier. I've got 2 nail salon clients right now and they're like, we're ready to move, we're ready to go. I'm like, hold on. There are new building codes that have just come into place within the last 18 months. You are now required to have upgraded HVAC because you've got to have a new filtration and exhaust system where you've got to have exhaust, air being sucked out, whether you're using natural ingredients or not. It doesn't matter. This particular system costs $40,000 minimum, right? So don't just go out and sign a lease. Understand and find a broker who understands what the process looks like. What is the building department looking for? What are some potential hurdles? Because if you're not planning and budgeting for $40,000 on top of other build out and your rent, you've got to rethink your decision.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds like
Yeah.
a very crazy investment. 40K plus the new plus everything else. That
Yeah.
sounds insane for a
And
business
same thing
owner.
with restaurants. People
Yeah.
don't understand. They're like, I just want to open a coffee shop. Well, you need to understand what the building codes are there. So whether or not coffee shops now, whether they're cooking food or not, they're required to have a grease trap because there's fat that gets go from the milk, from different other products, right? So even though you're not a full-blown restaurant, you've got to have a grease trap. And if the space you're looking for doesn't have it, you might be looking at $30,000 to $50,000 more. There's, and depending on the other, if you're a church or an event center, you know, the space based on how big it is must be sprinkled. You've got to look for, do you have enough fire exits? There's all these different things based on the type of use that should be should the broker should be asking those questions and prompting the business, when they're going through negotiations, um, so that someone doesn't end up, getting into a space and then they can't operate, and you're stuck in a lease.
So, do you think it's more advantageous for business owners to just lease the building then or the space rather than buying it with the at the end of the road? Because it sounds to me that you have to keep up with all these codes and all this maintenance and all these up things, and
Yeah.
that sounds like a huge headache for someone that's trying
It
to.
can be. It depends on the business and what their plan is. If
Yeah,
they're, say it's a doctor's office and they're like, we're going to be in business for at least another 20 years, then
yeah,
investing in a purchase is probably makes sense.
mm-hmm,
But very often, and it's a case by case situation, on how I advise. If it's a newer business, I usually suggest that they lease first.
mm-hmm,
Very rarely will I say pull the trigger on a purchase. Prove your concept, right?
mm-hmm,
So that when you go to a bank to buy a building, when you're ready to do that, because there's legacy involved with that too. You can, if you close the business down, then you've got an asset that hopefully by that
mm-hmm,
time you've paid off, right?
mm-hmm,
That you can replace with another tenant and have retirement income.
mm-hmm, correct.
So it all depends on what the goals of the business owner is. But very often, for new and smaller businesses, I usually just say lease for 3 to 5 years, get established, and then reevaluate then, because the lease model might be working great and you just need a second location,
Mm-hmm, yeah,
or it's growing and expanding and you're like, I'm tired of paying somebody else all this rent, it's time
yeah,
to buy, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you weigh the pros and cons, and talk people need to talk to their financial advisors,
mm-hmm,
as well,
mm-hmm.
and get advice from them.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to selling, right? Have you been in a situation where the owner is just like, I want to sell everything, my business, the asset, everything, and they don't get what they want for the asset, but they're in a rush, hurry? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and being hurried is never a great situation, and we can't
Mm-hmm.
always control that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say having a plan, helps prepare you for, if you haven't thought it through,
Yeah.
then you can scramble, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, there are people who end up having to sell, and that's why if they're selling their business, get a real evaluation from a business broker.
Mm-hmm.
Walk in with your eyes wide open, because expectations drive our emotions, right? And so if we have this expectation, I'm going to sell this building for $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
in reality, it's worth $380,000. You know, uh, that's not a client I'm going to take on, because I
Yeah.
know I'm not getting them to $1 million, right?
Yes.
And so they can find somebody else to try to sell it for $1 million, and it's going to sit on the market for 2, 3 years, if not longer. And eventually it's going to sell for the number that we thought it
Yeah.
would sell for. Right. So I think business owners have to have clear expectations
Mm-hmm.
and understand what their potential profits are and what their potential losses are. And, what are you willing at some point? Some people just have to cut their losses. Right.
Yeah.
And it also depends on, is there a mortgage on the building? Are you going to get
Mm-hmm.
enough to pay that mortgage off? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you can't do that, then that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other thing. So
Correct.
this really, what you're saying is just like, it just is uniform across the board. When people come to me and they're like, I'm ready to sell my business and I'm going to get this much. And then we do evaluation. Like, no, it's not worth
Yeah.
that much. It's
Yeah.
going to be worth less.
Yes.
And then we have to prepare them psychologically and emotionally to understand that they're not going to get that. Nobody's going
Yeah.
to give you that. But if
Right.
you sit on that and work on the business maybe a few years, if you have the
Yes.
time and the patience and all of that, then you're
Yeah.
gonna get that. So
Correct.
how much time beforehand do you think somebody selling an asset should also prepare themselves for that transaction if they want to get something that's not valued at?
Yeah. I would say probably about a year in advance, and
Mm-hmm.
start gathering the information,
Okay.
start, looking at the books, talking to
Yeah.
that business broker, get the
Mm-hmm.
advice that you need to get it to where it needs to be. What's the extra work you've got to put in to get the business cranking to where you can sell it for a higher price? And the same thing with the asset. What are the things, if you're, if you've just let the weeds grow and you're like, well, I'm just operating out of here, it's fine, whatever, there's a perception there. There's things that they can do, cut the weeds down, do some touch ups. I
Mm-hmm.
usually walk through with clients and say, here's the things that I would do, but I
Okay.
try to have clients not spend too much money,
Mm-hmm.
because in commercial, it's not as emotional of a decision. It's more of, does this building practically work for me?
Mm-hmm.
So paying attention to the roof, the HVAC, how old is that? Understanding, and I like to work with the asset owner,
Mm-hmm.
with whatever documentation and paperwork they have from when they purchased it. Do they have a survey?
Yeah.
Do they have an environmental report? Trying to gather all those documents ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've also been seeing a lot lately, and what I've encouraged people, if they don't want, if they want to really get a true value of what their property is, I tell them, go ahead and just get an appraisal done. Spend a few $1,000s, get your
Mm-hmm.
appraisal done.
Yeah.
That's one less hurdle for someone to overcome in the process, and money for them to have to pay. So
Mm-hmm.
it's another incentive for a buyer for us to say, hey, we've already got it appraised. And what that also does is, if someone comes in and lowball, we can say, we've got this appraisal right here, right? And so all those tire kickers that are just looking for that fire sale will go away. And, time is very valuable in real estate. That's all we've got, in our reputations and our experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I have had some owners do that has helped us in the process eliminate some hurdles and eliminate some negotiations that could have gone on for weeks, right? We're like, we've got the documentation, we've already paid for it, here it is, take it or
Yeah.
leave it, and maybe
That's
there's a little bit of room on that, price
mhm.
off the appraisal, right?
Mhm.
But it's not a fire sale.
That's a great advice. So basically, you're saying, yes, you can definitely sell your asset at a higher price if maybe you improve like a few foundational parts of the
Hmm.
business. Don't spend a lot of money. Just let's see if that makes sense to get a
Yep.
bigger ROI.
Yep.
Maybe you want to do a survey or environmental report. Like there's so many things that they can put money on that's going to bring the value up of that asset, and
Yes.
then get an appraisal, which is going to cost you a few $1,000s, and then
Yeah.
you have more leverage to play with.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have a clearer picture of what you have in your hand. And
Hmm.
if what you have in your hand is a crappy building, then let's clean it up a little bit, right? Let's get it to the place where we can try to maximize what you can get out of it, because even though commercial property isn't as emotional,
Hmm.
there are still first impressions, right?
Yeah.
If you see like there's a gaping hole in the roof, well, that's a problem, right? Every lender's going to require that is taken care of.
Yeah.
Who's taking care of it? And in that situation, I often go to the seller and say, have you had any hailstorms lately? Is there an opportunity for an insurance claim? Obviously not insurance fraud, but like, some people think, well, I'm going to have to spend $30,000 to replace the roof. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's a different fix. So, you know, maybe part of the roof is totally fine and you just need to patch it, right?
Hmm.
So all of these things, and any insurance company is, for a new buyer, is going to require that there's not a hole in the ceiling.
Yes.
So it's trying to get a hold of and prioritizing what are the things that will help get you the value to where it needs to be. But if someone's just like, I just want to get rid of it, then their expectation needs to be that they're going to probably end up with less in their pocket than they wanted.
Yes, and it goes back to business as well. When somebody just says, I just want to sell my business, then you're going to get whatever you can get,
Yeah,
basically. You're at the mercy of someone else's
correct.
hand at that point
Yep.
because,
It's not what you think it's worth. It's
yeah.
what the market thinks it's worth.
Exactly. It's exactly what except what the buyer thinks is worth at that
Correct.
point. Yeah. So you've always been in real estate brokering? No, you've not. Your whole
No,
life?
no, I've only been doing this about 11 years,
Okay. So
but
that's a
have
lot.
done a lot of transactions. But my background's actually the nonprofit sector. And so that's one of the areas that I love working with in real estate, because I understand the nonprofit world and the challenges that they face, along with, the real estate side. So, yeah, was in the nonprofit sector for about 20 years.
And what do you do in the nonprofit sector as well? What is it that
Yeah,
you?
so I no longer do. I do currently serve on a board for an incredible organization called Crazy Love Africa that empowers women with HIV in Uganda, along with educating their kids and creating micro grants and businesses, and just really like empowering those women. So that's kind of where I'm in the nonprofit sector right now. But I had my own nonprofit that we closed after COVID, but we were very focused on social justice. We would take people on trips to places like Ethiopia, Jordan, so that in Jordan borders Syria. And so we would take people to understand what people call an issue
Mhm.
and try to humanize that. So, you can't look at a Syrian refugee the same way when you sat down with them and had tea and heard their story, right?
Yeah.
And so very much humanizing that, and focusing on areas of social justice, women's empowerment, education, combating child trafficking, all of those things. So we would go and work with organizations, identify organizations that were already doing great work, primarily those who were run by locals who understand the culture and understand the people and the nuances of the challenges, and then try to raise awareness and funds for those nonprofits so they can continue doing great work.
Wow. So you're a very deep person, I feel, right?
Yeah.
Because you get your hands on really great causes like the nonprofit ones, but
Mm-hmm.
you also feel like you're very emotionally connected to your customers as well that you're working with. So that's
Thank
what
you.
brings
I
it.
mean, it's been a journey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we always have to continue doing our own work,
Hmm.
and checking our ego,
Hmm.
and yeah, and going to therapy, doing the things that we need to do to heal ourselves,
Hmm.
so that we can show up for other people.
What would you say somebody, a business owner, because you just sent healing and be in a good mental space, a business owner that wants to sell, a part of them wants to just evacuate, just go to another life and just have a
Yeah,
different life, but
yeah,
the other part is saying no, I don't want to, and then the other part, it gets in
mm,
the way.
yeah.
What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them to just slow down.
Hmm.
Take a breath.
Hmm.
You know, and go for a walk, get some movement. Go outside in nature. Still yourself, because
Yeah.
I think we're so reactive, and our bodies are so reactive
Hmm.
to what we consider a threat. I mean, this morning I've been fighting severe anxiety, and this is the reality, right? Like when you're in a transition or the market's tough.
Hmm.
For me, it's like I had to go outside and just sit in the sunlight for about
Yes,
10 minutes,
that always helps me.
feel the breeze, listen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's my therapist has a great thing. It's called the 5 4 3 2 1. It's like, look for 5 things that you can touch, and then touch them, feel it. Look for 2 smells, and just 5 4 3, engage all 5 of the senses in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And it brings you back a little bit more to your center, because I think making a decision out of duress is not usually the best decision making place, right?
Yes.
um so I would say, I mean, I would sit down with a therapist, because lots of times the emotions and our reactions are to symptoms, not to the root cause. So to take the time and understand, what do I really want, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that is something that we're not taught to do.
Hmm.
We're like, oh, I want money, I want this. Okay, but why? What is the motivation? Why did you start the business to begin with?
Hmm.
What drove you to do that? And now what's driving you away? Maybe
Hmm.
it's just an issue of needing some more work-life balance. Maybe it's you need a break. Maybe you need to hire somebody else to run the business.
Hmm.
There's all these different things. So I also highly encourage people to have a business coach, and my business coach has been vital for major decisions that I've had to make,
Hmm.
including, when I went out on my own, including when I decided that I needed some additional resources and support and energy, and making this switch to Keller Williams.
Hmm.
I get to keep who I am, and I think there's a lot of time as business owners, we've got a lot of pride for what we've built, right? And
Yeah.
so we think that some sort of shift makes us a failure, but that's not the case. Sometimes making the shift gets you emotionally and mentally to a place that you have been wanting to be, that you haven't been able to get to. So talk to a business coach, talk to friends and family that are supportive and are willing to be objective, and who
Hmm.
are willing to call you out on your stuff, right? I mean, because sometimes you're the one making a bad decision,
Hmm.
and you're creating the stress and putting it on yourself and sabotaging yourself. So I think having that accountability
Hmm.
and having somebody reflect back their objective feedback is really important. But yeah, slowing down, um, and getting as grounded as you possibly can.
I love that advice. You came packed with some really good insights right now,
Mm,
and I know you just did a transition from your business to Keller Williams, and I imagine the transition is complex
yeah,
because you had an identity, now you're going to another identity.
yeah,
And that's exactly what business owners feel. They go from
yes,
like, my business has been my identity for 50 years, and now I'm going to this new identity, which
yeah,
I'm afraid of going to.
yes.
What are some things that you've done for yourself through that transition?
I think for me, and gosh, Keller Williams has such great resources. And I just got done with a conference about hiring and,
Mhm.
setting up your business and things like that. For me, instead of me saying, no, I'm going to keep doing it my way, there are some things I'm going to keep doing my way. Right. But it's a new perspective and being curious about the change. Right.
Mhm.
Maybe just because I've been doing this for 11 years a certain way, times are changing, market is changing.
Mhm.
Let's be curious and see what are the tools that feel authentic and useful to me in my business, right? So, but I think that as well as just having the people in your life to be a sounding board, not to pull the trigger. We
Mhm.
had multiple companies come after us to join them as their commercial team, and think about values.
Mhm.
What are your values? What are things that you're not willing to compromise?
Mhm.
And make sure that wherever you're going, whatever transition you're making, align with your values. And remember that values change. Values don't always stay the same. Where I'm at in my life right now versus 10 years ago, it's
Mhm.
very different, right?
Mhm.
I want my time freedom. I want time with my kids. I want, to travel when I can, and unfortunately the market has been a little bit tough. So I haven't been able to do all of those things. However, in making the decision to make this transition to Keller Williams, it was making sure that my values and where I'm at right now and
Mhm.
what my goals are, which is to build a very strong commercial team that are different than everybody else, that take the time to listen, that are making an impact on community, you know, that was the right move, and being able to take in, the good and what just taking different ideas and considering it, but yeah, I think curiosity and, um, there's always going to be fear, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's always going to be anxiety, but I've heard that anxiety is because you're either living in the past or in the future.
Mhm.
And I know that in my head, right? But I still experience anxiety. So what are the tools that I can use to get back into my body, to get grounded, to
Mhm.
get to a place where I'm making better decisions,
Mhm.
not based on anxiety, right?
Mhm. I love that. So, yeah, identity shifting is a complex transition. So, what mindset did you have to embody in order
Mm,
to go through that transition, even to decide I'm going to do
yeah.
this?
Well, I think it's like the pain of where you are. If that
Mm.
exceeds where you feel like you need to be,
Mhm.
then that's probably a sign that you need to make a change.
Mhm.
And, the pain has to be worse than the unknown and the uncomfortability of making a transition.
Mhm.
But no, it is going to be uncomfortable. It
Yeah.
just is. So you can sit here in pain and not change anything, or you can be uncomfortable for a season and confront your fears, confront your anxiety, and move forward and make a decision. If it's the wrong one, guess what? You still can make a different decision, right? So I think failures are an opportunity for learning. But I think if we're just staying stagnant, then nothing's going to change, right?
Mhm.
And eventually it just kind of, your life kind of atrophies, and you're depressed and you don't want to do anything. You're irritable. I mean, listen, I've been there. We've all had burnout, I think. But I think it's knowing when and there's times that you just need to sit, right? And not do anything.
Mhm.
But that's if that's where you're supposed to be. And maybe
Yeah.
it's just a slower season. But then, and for me now, I've had the last 2.5 years have been slow, right? But now I'm having to make the transition of like, oh, I've got to make some changes. I've got to change my mentality.
Mhm.
I need to get on a better eating schedule. I need to, get healthier, get outside, get in the sun, drink more water, all of these things that slowly help your body and emotions get to the place where you're ready to move forward. And when that growth hits, you've got to be ready for it.
It's crazy how the simple things in life are actually the things that makes us feel so much better. Like just being
Yeah.
in the sun, being in nature, being present, not think about the future. The things that we can do at all times, but we
Hmm.
do not do. And
Yeah.
those are the things that help us with our transitions and our identities. I have to shift identities so many times already in my life through
Hmm.
business. Business
Yeah.
makes you have a new identity
Yeah.
because it throws you to the weeds and to the
Yeah.
wolves, and then you have to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think too, like, in speaking to identity, we often latch onto what we do as who we are. right? Those are two very different things.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of years ago when things were really bad, I was like, I think we're going to go bankrupt,
Yeah.
and in several areas of my life, my identities had been stripped of me through different hardships and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So all that I had left was I'm a successful commercial real estate broker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens if that goes away? What happens if
Mm-hmm.
I go bankrupt? What happens? Oh, I'm still here
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still good. I'm not good because of what I do. I mean, I think what you do is an outpouring of who you are, but I think for us to go back to the core of our inherent goodness and realize that's our identity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we just happen to make a living doing this.
I love everything that you said, especially because if people, all of us have to remember that, yes, what we do is great and we do it
Mhm.
all the time and we do it so much passion and effort. But if something goes wrong, it's just the season that we're going through. It's not
Mhm.
us. We're still very successful. We're still
Yeah.
very, confident. We're still
Yeah.
doing the work. We're still very passionate. It's just the season and it's
Yeah.
not going to impact us. It's not, doesn't identify us,
Correct.
basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'm gonna ask you a question. If you were at dinner,
Mm.
um, and there's somebody there that you would like to sit next to, who would that be, and what would you ask them?
Hmm. There's a lot of people, and I have been asked this question before, so I'm going to try to give a different answer.
Okay.
Um, gosh, I would say probably. Oh gosh, one of my heroes is Padma Lakshmi. She's a TV host, and was part of Top Chef for a long time. I love seeing a woman and a woman of color represented on television, and I also
Yeah.
come from an Indian background. But how she's able to pull together and tell stories through food, I would love to kind of get into her brain a little bit more, and eat some of her food. That's someone that just came to mind.
Because
I'm
I
sure
love
there's lots of others I could tell you, but that's someone I'm just curious on how people curate community,
it.
and I feel like she's done a great job doing that with not just with Top Chef, but with her other shows that she's put out. Really shedding light on immigrant communities and how much richness and love and joy they bring through their food and through their culture. I think it's fascinating.
I always admire how some individuals just are so make it so look so easy to create a
Mhm.
community. They people
Yeah.
just gravitate
Yeah.
towards them. I was
Yeah.
wondering what is the secret sauce because
Yeah. Oh, I think it's authenticity, right?
yeah,
Like,
100%.
and this is spirit of hospitality,
Hmm.
and I think you attract the people that are supposed to be in your life. I've lost a lot of friends, but I've
Hmm.
gained a lot of ones, and your value again is not it's not dependent upon how many friends you have on Facebook
No,
or in your life or in your living room.
no.
It's the quality of people that you have around you that's most important.
Yeah. Well, I really loved our conversation. We have talked from like real estate leases to acquisitions to identity
And food.
and food. Is there anything that we haven't talked that you would like to talk right now? Say something.
Yeah. So, I mean, if people are curious about commercial real estate, one of the things that we've done recently is actually start our own commercial real estate podcast called Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered.
Love it.
Um, we talk to attorneys, we talk to roofers, we talk to all kinds of business owners, business coach,
Yeah.
nonprofit leaders. So, for people who feel intimidated by commercial real estate, you can take a listen there. We want to make it approachable. We want to make it educational. And if you have questions about commercial real estate, call us, reach out to us on Instagram, call our office, email me. We love talking to people and helping people, even if we're just pointing them in the right direction. So would love to connect with your listeners that way.
And I would love to put in the show notes where they can find you, which is on
Great.
LinkedIn. Where
Yeah.
else?
Instagram as well.
Instagram as well. Okay.
Yep, probably Instagram is probably the best place you're going to follow. One place I would follow at Instagram at Caleb
Okay.
David,
Okay.
and then we also have a company one, but most of the posts and about our podcasts and things we're working on are on my personal page.
Great. So I will put that in the show notes for everybody to connect with you. And it's been a pleasure to have you here, Caleb.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for the great
Thank
conversation
you.
and
I've
for the
really enjoyed
insights.
it.
Yes, it was so much fun. And for everybody that's listening, I will see you next time. Adios, muchachos. Bye.